Funnily enough, actually, we looked at some of the IP data, and I don't even believe the data, but apparently 45% of the IP touching Ethena was from Korea.
No way.
What would be the end game of Ethena and USD?
Is like people dismiss it, and that's kind of the opportunity because everyone is ignoring it, and that's when you get 100x either as an investor or as a builder.
Why did you guys choose to work with BlackRock BUIDL in terms of making USDe? Were there other options you also considered?
I need to recognize that I was probably wrong at the beginning of the year and put my hand up and say that I was wrong. So the place that you can 10x this though is if you actually take a run at Tether on the exchanges and say my treasuries are falling from 5 to 4 to 3%, and this is going from 10 to 12 to 15.
The yields in Japan is really low, but from using basis trading, you guys can also build JPYE and work with exchanges there.
We're kind of glad that the Japanese hadn't found Ethena at scale, because the trade of borrowing Japanese yen into Ethena was 10 times better than ever trying to do that within T-bills.
Talked about launching Ethena network, and I guess it will be L2, but I was kind of curious what was the rationale behind building L2.
So right now Ethena is more than 2x the size of all of the open interest of every single DEX on chain combined. I think interest rates going to zero will start to get a lot more money into crypto risk.
If rate goes zero in this cycle, then what would happen in Ethena, do you think?
Welcome back to PFP. We're online today with a very special guest. Who are you?
I am Guy from Ethena, and that's my story.
Well, that was brief and sweet. Thank you for coming. What do you do at Ethena, and what is Ethena?
Yeah, so I'm the founder, and Ethena is basically a synthetic dollar protocol. So we issue something that looks and feels a little bit like a stablecoin, but has a very different sort of backing and construction to how it was created. So the original idea behind Ethena and actually USDe, the product, came from Arthur Hayes, who put out an article at the beginning of 2023. And in there, he sort of outlined his vision for why he thought this is one of the biggest opportunities within crypto, which is create our own form of money. And the basic way that works is you take in some form of crypto collateral, so that can be BTC or ETH, and then you use that to delta hedge the collateral with derivatives on the other side. And the interesting byproduct of that is that you create essentially a dollar position out of those two things netting off. And you also capture what is one of the largest forms of scalable yield within the space, which is the basis that you find within the futures market. And so you can sort of tokenize that into a dollar that has some pretty interesting characteristics.
Yeah, then I read the article from Arthur Hayes. I guess the title was "The Stone Cross." I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
What success especially inspired you to start Ethena from this article?
Yeah, it was something that I've been doing on the side. In my old day job, I was playing around with DeFi and crypto for a few years before I started Ethena. And this type of trade had been something that had been going on in the background with people for even before actually Tether existed. So the backstory here was actually when people used to trade on BitMEX, we didn't actually have stablecoins in dollars there. And so if someone was going on holiday and they wanted to just go into dollars instead of holding a BTC long, they just use their collateral and then short it on the other side to recreate a dollar on the exchange. And so the funny thing is that Ethena's idea is not that new or sort of novel. It's just that people have been doing it as sort of a side hobby rather than a product that could actually be distributed to users on the outside. And so, yeah, it was just something I've been doing on the side. I'd been thinking that there was interesting ways that you could actually improve on the idea that Arthur originally had. And I had sort of quit my job just after Terra Luna had collapsed in 2022, where I wanted to come and actually build and do something within crypto. And when I saw his article, I just thought that was a very strong signal where I've been thinking about it for a while. And he put out a bit of a call to say, if someone wanted to come build this, he'd try and sort of make it a success. So it just felt like the right thing in the right time.
So you said you came into crypto in 2022?
So I've been playing around with it since 2019 in DeFi. So I had a friend who's another DeFi founder, who's a lending protocol called Maple Finance. They do under collateralized lending. And yeah, he had got me into it at the back end of 2019. This is before DeFi was even really a thing. It was MakerDAO, Synthetics, Aave before it was even called Aave. And yeah, just found it really interesting on the side. I thought it was more of a science experiment rather than anything that was going to be as big as it did sort of get afterwards. But yeah, I think it was just after Luna had gone down that I decided I actually wanted to leave my job and do something within the space. I think the reason for that was just looking back to last cycle, the founders who sort of did the best. It's usually like you've got to take an anti-cyclical like approach to things where you're saying you actually have to build things in the like bleak darkness of a bear market so that you actually have a product that's ready when the bull market does come back. And so I had always had in my mind that if I was going to do something, you kind of had to commit to the space when things were looking as dire as they possibly could. And it felt like when all of that stuff was unfolding, that was sort of the moment to jump in and try.
Yeah, I think you, the person, Guy의, is not well known to Korean audiences, I guess, compared to the name of Ethena. So can you describe more about your experience before you starting Ethena?
Yeah, let's get personal.
Yeah. It's nothing actually that interesting. I think it's pretty similar background to a lot of people. So I worked in banking originally, and then I moved to like a hedge fund that was based in the US. So what they did was look at financial services mainly, and that was investing across the capital structure into banks, credit card companies, and that was both in the equity and the debt. So yeah, nothing that was like too relevant, but if you kind of look at the business model of a lot of things within DeFi, it actually looks very similar to the stuff that you see within the real world. And yeah, had just sort of found investing into DeFi specifically intellectually interesting, and that's what sort of drew me to the space originally.
How was your experience? I don't know, make special skills in working in crypto or your financial product of Ethena Labs?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of people who sort of come from TradFi into crypto, and if they don't have like native experience, I think they sometimes sort of miss a lot of the tricks of like what actually gets crypto people going. And so sometimes you'll come in and sort of forget about the marketing side or how to actually engage with communities in the right way to get people excited. And so I think one good thing is that I've been like a user of these products for the last like 3 or 4 years, and I had sort of seen what goes well, what gets people excited. And I think, well, I hope that was sort of like reflected when we did our go-to-market. It was like pretty aggressive, you know, all of the sort of like videos we're putting out, the melodies and all that kind of stuff. It felt like quite native. And so one thing I just recognized is that yes, there are some good things that you can sort of take from your previous job, which one thing I think that you get in TradFi, which is quite different to crypto, is that there's quite a lot of discipline, right, around the way that you look at numbers, and you're disciplined around the way that you work long hours, you sort of like dedicate to things with rigor. And that's one thing that I think is quite good to bring in the space, where sometimes I think it's lacking sometimes with other teams within crypto. But you've always got to balance that, I think, a little bit with the things that make crypto fun and get people excited to make sure that you're not sort of just too stiff and sort of boring. Yeah.
Just going back to the concept that you first inspired by the Arthur Hayes article, then I guess the concept itself was pretty much public to anybody, and it was pretty known for a long time. Then, what do you think there was a special point of the Ethena that can execute much better than other teams or founders?
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing. Like there was, even when we first came out and we're doing like our seed round and stuff like that, it wasn't a very consensus thing to think would go well. Like there was a lot of negativity, a lot of like reasons why things can't go well or why it doesn't work. But that's also kind of the nature of something that's like a really good idea, which is like people dismiss it, and that's kind of the opportunity because everyone is ignoring it. And that's when you get 100x either as an investor or as a builder. So I think a bit of it is actually having just like blind, naive, almost like overconfidence in your own idea when people are telling you it's not going to work for X, Y, Z reason. The question you should ask yourself isn't what happens if these people are right and it's not going to work. The question you should ask is like, what happens if all of these people are wrong, and like what's the upside on the other end? And so that was like a big piece for me, which is I thought that people were sort of dismissing it out of hand like too quickly. And like if you sort of think about the big categories within crypto, we sort of already know what are the 3 things that can be worth $10 to $100 billion as like big outcomes. It's money like BTC and Tether. It's exchanges like Binance and Coinbase, and then it's like blockchains like Ethereum and Solana. And so if you're building in one of those 3 categories, people know that if it works, it's a really big outcome. And I tend to believe that like if you're building in a category that's that big and you're doing something that's unique and slightly different, that sort of sets you up with like a pretty decent chance to have like a good outcome. So that was sort of like the belief that we had, which was the market for like dollars within crypto was so big, and we think is going to like 5 to 10x from where it is now. that if you're at least doing something that was interesting and scalable, there was an opportunity for it to go well.
Yeah, then what was the thing that other people don't see, but you can find out? What was the point that
What was
other
the
people dismiss?
catalyst
Yeah.
for you
Moment,
to actually start?
Yeah, I think, well, a huge piece of it was like definitely luck, right? So when we came out at the beginning of the year, funding rates were at 20, 30, 40, 50%. And so it's not difficult to sell a product that's paying that amount of like real yield, right? That's is probably the easiest thing in the world to sell. But having said that, you've got to sort of like prepare for those moments beforehand. You can't just turn up when the environment is like that and just say like, here's our product. And so I think the one piece that people didn't recognize in the background, which is potentially like the hardest piece of Ethena, but is probably like the actual moat of Ethena as well, is just the relationships with the centralized exchanges. So clearly like Ethena is now one of the largest entities and most important things that's actually facing like the largest exchanges in the space. So in terms of like exposure that exchanges have to single entities, Ethena is now the largest. And to get them comfortable with something like that takes a lot of work in the background for them to at least think that you're going to be doing things in the right and responsible way. And so a lot of this was sort of like pre-prepping with them in the background to understand why this could be beneficial for them, what was the upside for them if it did go well, and why like we as a team were sort of responsible and could be trusted with that kind of responsibility. And so I think that was one piece where if a team just came out and tried to do that in the same way that we did at the beginning of the year, there was like 6 to 9 months of work with exchanges before we'd even taken $1 into the protocol before that actually happened.
Yeah, I think the mention you just mentioned that you have Ethena has a close relationship with central exchanges, and I think that is pretty much like a moat from the Ethena Labs. And how the relationship was formed in the with the Ethena Labs? It was pre-built, or did you, I don't know,
Knock on door.
Yeah, honestly, just good old BD, like getting in front of people, like getting out to Asia and actually meeting them face to face. And yeah, I think a lot of these things, it's quite hard to see what kind of person is actually sitting on the other side of a conversation when it's all on videos and Zooms and that kind of stuff. And you actually have to just get there and meet people in person. So yeah, I think a huge piece of it was no sort of special sauce. It was just trying to get in front of them, but then also understanding like people's incentives, right? So everyone responds to economic incentives, and like the clearest way that you can get someone to work with you is demonstrate to them why there's upside for them to do that themselves. And obviously these exchanges are some of like the most economically driven like entities that exist out there. And so I think there's a clear story, which is the growth of Ethena is actually helpful to the exchanges, because the more that we grow, the deeper the derivative market within crypto gets. The lower like the cost of financing within the market also gets, because we push down funding rates. And so like a bigger Ethena is a much healthier market for centralized exchanges in general. And obviously we generate quite a lot of fees just with like our exposure sort of facing them. And so I think part of it is always just putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, which is making the pitch as to why it's good for them if Ethena succeeds.
Then I think we should go back to the basic concept of Ethena before we going to a deep dive into the concept of it. So why do we need the decentralized and crypto native dollars, just USD, concept of the USDe?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons. One is like maybe more idealistic, and then one is just a little bit more practical. So like the idealist one is, what's kind of the point of the whole of DeFi and all of the stuff that we're doing if all of it's running on dollars that are frozen by Tether and Circle? And I think we've kind of just got used to that as like a concept because it's the best thing that we can sort of deal with. But like fundamentally, if we're actually honest with ourselves, there's actually no point in making any of these applications decentralized whatsoever if the most important asset that's running through all of them is completely centralized with two companies. I think the second one is actually just thinking about the yield. So I think within crypto, there's obviously an obsession with yield, but I think one of the like paradoxes of crypto is that everyone's obsessed with yield, but nothing actually produces enough cash flow to actually generate real yield in the space. And so it was a fundamentally useful thing, we thought, where if we just take a step back and think about what is the one product that is most likely to get in the hands of 1 billion people that's coming out of crypto, it probably looks like something where you're just holding $1 in your wallet and earning a yield. Like it's a super simple product, but it's kind of actually the most powerful one that we think like the most people on earth actually want to engage with crypto on. And so for us, it's actually just taking what is a uniquely interesting source of yield within crypto and putting that in a dollar product. We thought was just a fundamentally like useful product for people all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was I want to like tap a little bit more about the expansion strategy of Ethena. Like Ethena initially had one product, USDe, but you guys also now have USTb and also like plan to launch your Ethena network. So I was kind of curious, like, what was the strategy behind launching new token, the USTb?
Yeah, so I think a big one around this, I need to like recognize that I was probably wrong at the beginning of the year and like put my hand up and say that I was wrong. So it was clear to me, I think, through the year that actually some users were comfortable with the way that Ethena was designed, and then others had like concerns around what happens in a bear market if funding doesn't sort of turn out the way that you want, and like just you've seen a general weakness in the market. I hope in the last few months people got a bit more comfortable around that idea where there's been zero issues with Ethena whatsoever, as we've sort of had billions flow in and out as well. And part of this was actually just trying to give users a bit more comfortable, a bit more comfort around the idea that if there was something to go wrong with USDe in terms of funding and the way that it's sort of designed with perps, is you just have a fallback option to just come back into normal stable coins or treasuries if required. And so that's more sitting there as like an insurance policy if required. And then the other piece around it is also recognizing that some users don't actually just want to engage with that type of product, and they just want to have something that's a bit more simple and looks a bit more like a normal stable coin that they can use. I think the key piece here, though, is the strategy for having this as a separate product is actually with centralized exchanges in mind for distribution. So one of the clear pieces that we've seen is that the most important place to actually get dollars to distribute to users, because all of the users are actually sitting on centralized exchanges, is making sure that they actually want those products to succeed on their own platform. And so the idea here is that we're taking the BlackRock-backed USTb and essentially acting as like a distribution partner to take it onto these exchanges where you can list it as collateral and then trade with derivatives with an embedded yield on top. And the key piece here is that we can now offer both of these things as a product to the exchanges, which can then sort of like pass them on to the customers on the other side. So yeah, there were sort of two pieces of rationale there, which was having a insurance policy if required with USDe to just give people a bit more comfort around the resilience around the whole thing. And then the second one was just giving users more option to express their own risk preference.
Talking a little bit more about USTb, like there are a lot of like yield-bearing tokens that is generated from the tokenized US bonds. But
Yeah.
I was kind of curious, like, why did you guys like choose to work with BlackRock BUIDL in terms of making USTb? Were there like other options you also considered?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's obviously just a great brand and reputation around both Securitize and them. And I think for us, it was what are we like uniquely bringing to the table? I totally agree with you that there's actually too many of these two products that like they're not that interesting as like a standalone business in my view. The interesting piece here is actually saying, can Ethena be the conduit to take that product and actually take decentralized exchanges, which are all invested into Ethena and want to see Ethena grow? Because that is actually unique and interesting, because I think the market opportunity set to have just T-bills sitting on chain is pretty small, and I don't think it's going to grow that much. You kind of look at the wallet analysis on chain, it's just foundation. So putting like $5-10 million of the foundation into these products and it's sitting there on chain and not really doing anything. It's not something that I can see like 10xing in the next few years. The place that you can 10x this though is if you actually take a run at Tether on the exchanges and say, instead of Tether taking all of that yield to themselves, you basically take the yield from the treasury and you give it to exchanges to distribute your product on the other side. And so the exchange turns around and goes, right, why do I want Tether to capture 5% rather than something that's neutral across all of these platforms? And it's now paying me a fee to actually distribute it to the users on the other side. And so that's sort of the slightly unique angle that we're taking there, which is really trying to think about our relationships with the exchanges and how that can sort of like leverage the distribution of the product.
Then I wonder what is an incentive for from BlackRock or other TradFi institutions to join the on-chain economy or DeFi ecosystem?
Yeah, I think I have like a slightly cynical view on this, which is like RWAs are not going to be the product that actually brings TradFi money into crypto, because they can already access those products in the real world. It's actually strictly worse for them to hold this stuff on chain with all of these other different risks rather than just holding it in their accounts within the real world. What are the products that actually bring TradFi money into crypto? It's stuff that's uniquely enabled by crypto, not stuff that is just recreating stuff that exists in the real world. And so that's actually a big push for us at Ethena, which is thinking about USDe, where you've essentially taken in the largest form of scalable yield into a dollar, and you can actually go to TradFi and say, hey, this is actually totally different to the stuff that you see within the real world. do you want to access crypto yield in this like safe and secure product that we can actually deliver to you? That's how you get new dollars into crypto. It's not like giving them the same things that they already do day to day. And then I think maybe just taking one step back and thinking about the interest rate environment within the US and how that might sort of like change this dynamic going forward. One of the most interesting things about the yield on Ethena is that it has like a negative correlation to rates in the real world, where you typically see rates coming down on treasury bonds in the US. That leads to increased like speculation prices and like demand for leverage within crypto. And so actually the rates within crypto go in the opposite direction to rates in the real world. Why is that interesting? Because at some point, the guys who are sitting on trillions of dollars of fixed income instruments in the real world, they're going to look at crypto and say, my treasuries are falling from 5 to 4 to 3%, and this is going from 10 to 12 to 15, and it's becoming exponentially more interesting for them to sort of engage with products like ours. And that's really the moment that we think like Ethena is sort of like set up to actually produce this type of stuff for TradFi institutions.
So I think like that kind of idea was like reflected in the strategy of the use cases of USDe. Like if we look at the current use case of USDe, it is currently used as a settlement token for the Bybit exchange for the trading assets, and also like as a collateral for money market. And also I heard that like Ethena is working with like Holy Hell and like Genesis Pay as a payment token. So I was kind of curious like what kind of like strategies and the use cases will be more significant for USDe.
So I think the use cases that you hit on were the main ones. I think the killer use case is actually margin collateral on centralized exchanges. So the piece that you picked up there with Bybit, for me is kind of the killer use case where you're just trading perps and then your collateral is paying you a yield on the other side. I think the most simple one of just holding $1 in your wallet, like I was describing, earning a yield, again, sounds super simple, but that's kind of like the core use case that you see within DeFi. I think the area where we're going to be less competitive versus new guys who are coming into this market is probably on that payment side, where you're starting to see, Stripe, Visa, PayPal, everyone's got some sort of strategy of how they're going to be engaging with stablecoins and operating on chain. And ultimately, I think when you're at a startup, you need to recognize like what are the games that you can win when you're playing them, and what are the games that you're definitely not going to win. And, we don't have the same brand or reputation or history as a Stripe or a Visa or a PayPal. And so you have to take a step back sometimes and say, okay, that's actually the game that you guys are going to go for, and you guys can fight over that with USDC. We're just playing in a slightly different piece of the market, which is yield-bearing collateral and collateral for trading within crypto. So I think when you're operating in big markets like dollars within crypto, there's space for different guys to take different niches and attempt to win those like little niches. And I think that's sort of our strategy, which is try not to be like everything to everyone. But if you're going to pick an area that you want to win, make sure that you're like 10x better than everyone else at that.
I think there are pretty many types of USD stablecoin in the market right now. I just like said, there are USDC and USDT for payments, and also synthetic dollars like USDe by Ethena. How do you think the market landscape will be shaped in the near future? Do these products are going to compete each other, or one single convergence will occur, do you think?
Yeah, so I think might be slightly controversial, but I actually think Tether's dominance is going to like continue into the future. So all of the new entrants that come into the market, they're kind of eating at USDC's market share rather than Tether. And the reason for that is USDC is plugged into more of these sort of like regulated bubbles within crypto, like the examples I was giving around the payments over there. It's really like PayPal and, when Revolut comes out with the stablecoin and all these guys, they're really going to be going for the same market that USDC is sitting in right now. And all of these new T-bill products, treasury products, again, it's USDC. The bit that Tether did amazingly well, and people don't understand, I think, how powerful of a moat it is that they kind of won the game of being money on exchanges, where if you go on Binance, it's like BTC, USDT, ETH, USDT. And for Binance to ever like try and change like the status quo of just having USDT as the quote currency is an enormous risk to Binance's business as it is. And so they never want to touch it. And then I think the other angle that they did very well was really recognizing that developing worlds want dollars more than they want like Bitcoin even as like a store of value. And they're like their presence sitting on Tron and basically serving like the world that exists outside of the financial rails in the US. That's like a huge use case where they've just got an incredible brand around what they're doing. And so I think like Tether's moat is much more defendable than what USDC's got. and you will continue to see tons more competition come into the market because people understand how big the prize is when you actually win it well. But I think that it's going to sort of continue with the share that you see with Tether. USDC's market share comes down to people like Ethena or whatever that sort of come into the market to compete. And in a few years, the structure has more competitors, but the market share kind of looks the same.
Yeah, I think it's really a smart move to focus on exchanges and working with exchanges and being collateral for that. Like, and as you mentioned, like developing countries, like I was kind of had a thought and had a thesis that if Ethena issues another currency stablecoin, it will be really interesting. Like, for example, the yields in Japan is really low, but from using like basis trading, you guys can also build like JPYE and work with the exchanges there. I think that would be a really smart move and things that can really give better yields to the Japanese people and find a really great PMF. So I was kind of curious if you guys have some like plan to expand to other currency.
Yeah, it's a super interesting idea because if you remember, there's that whole like carry trade thing that was going on with Japan, like blowing up a couple of months ago. And what was happening there, right, with people borrowing yen and then putting it into the US, whether it was in like bonds or equities. And we were kind of joking around in Ethena that we're kind of glad that the Japanese hadn't like found Ethena at scale because the trade of like borrowing Japanese yen into Ethena was like 10 times better than ever trying to do that within T-bills. But yeah, I think it is interesting to think about this being like provided in different currencies. The only constraint around it there is that you need a derivative market like denominated in that currency where you can sort of short in yen or short in whatever other currency there is. And at the moment, there just isn't a large derivative market for trading like perps or futures in other currencies. I think the other thing that we've sort of observed as well is that most people in the world, like the demand for an external currency, it's kind of like 99% demand for dollars rather than something else. And I think even though we have all of the issues that people sort of point out with the dollar, it still tends to be the best out of the bunch, if that makes sense. It's like the best worst option that there is out there. And so, yeah. I do think it's an interesting idea. You just sort of need to see derivatives and that kind of stuff evolve in a much bigger way in those countries. And yeah, it's funny. I had a trip out to Tokyo maybe around a month ago now, and I hadn't actually recognized that even the exchanges out there don't seem to have like USDC and USDT like plugged into the exchanges. Like they don't use it as a quote currency there. So it feels like they're maybe a little bit like behind in terms of like integrating like dollars generally into the system there. But it feels like that's sort of coming at some point.
Yeah, Japanese exchanges don't even have Solana in their exchange. They're only like a small number of listings.
Got down. They don't even have
and yeah, and kind of like moving more towards like different topic. Like I was kind of curious about the expansion plan about the Ethena network. Like you guys have talked about launching Ethena network, and I guess it will be L2. But I was kind of curious what was the rationale behind building L2 and what strategy you guys have for that?
Yeah, so it's slightly different than just doing things on an L2. So the way that we're thinking about this is we want to start to build like apps that are incubated on Ethena and can like be beneficial to growing USDe. So we have a bunch of different ideas of call it six to eight different financial applications that we think are uniquely enabled by USDe as like an asset going into it. I sort of frame it in the same way. If we think about what's the difference between Lido and Eigenlayer, it's kind of the same thing, right? You're just taking ETH and you're putting it in a staking contract, but like for Lido, it was just an asset. For Eigenlayer, it was like an idea and a platform that other people wanted to come and build upon. And so really what we're trying to do here is actually, it's an app and product focused like initiative where we want to see exchanges, interest rate markets, under collateralized lending, all of these different ideas built around USD as like the focus point. And what happens there is if these financial applications are successful in growing, that obviously sort of increases the supply of USDe. But the more interesting thing that we've introduced, and you might have seen it last week with an announcement around ethereal DEX, is sort of the tokens actually coming back from the apps that are building on Ethena back to end of the token. And so we've done a lot of thinking around what we think the best token models in the market look like. And everyone in the team sort of agreed that BNB was basically the best model that we'd come across. And the reason for that is like these launch pools that come out on the listings, you get other people's tokens paid back to BNB as sort of like a yield continuously. And if you look back in the last, 4 or 5 years, it's like 50 to 100% APY in other people's tokens coming back to BNB. And so the idea here is that Ethena's supporting these new applications which are building on it. If it goes well, you see an increase in USDe supply, but then also like the value from the tokens can sort of flow back to Ethena in the same way that it does with BNB. And so, yeah, to be clear, we do have plans to sort of launch something around like the exchange where other apps will be building on there and it'll be settling down to like Ethena's network. But it's not also exclusive to just apps that are sitting within our own chain. We recognize that people might want to build elsewhere and use USD as the asset, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe they want to be on Initia, who knows? And all we're doing is sort of like providing a template for us to sort of like help these apps come to market.
Then do you think the core differentiation of these products, DEX or exchanges, will be the use of USDe below the product?
Yeah, there's two pieces to it. So like very natural relationship here, right, where exchanges are huge sinks for dollar demand, and if they go well, it's like billions of dollars of demand for dollars. To have USDe with native yield while you're trading within the exchange is like a really cool like improvement, I think, to everything else that you see in terms of like DEXs at the moment. But the most interesting piece for the DEX is that Ethena can actually plug in its liquidity to this DEX and actually bootstrap it from zero into one of the largest, like almost overnight. So like right now, Ethena is more than 2x the size of all of the open interest of every single DEX on chain combined. And so our ability to basically come in with some of the backing of USDe and bootstrap this thing up to one of the largest exchanges pretty quickly, that's actually the most interesting piece for them, which is if I think about what's different between the user experience now with a DEX and a CEX, it's really the liquidity difference is still quite wide. And your ability to have like Ethena on the other side with natively yield-bearing collateral, we think is like a pretty interesting like proposition for people.
We saw the proposal of the Ethereum implying the launch of the Ethereum, which is the L3 DEX on the Ethena network. Then how do you think the modular structure of this product, financial products on top of Ethena and other network? Then why do you think this kind of structure would be more effective than using the single chain ecosystem that can connect pretty much compatibly?
Yeah, so I think there's like different answers for like different types of applications. So I think a perpetual exchange in particular is very well suited to being an app chain that basically lives on its own block space. And the reason for that is like the amount of performance that you actually need coming out of an exchange necessitates that it's not sharing the block space with other apps. So the moment that you want to trade the most is when things are getting liquidated, when the market's crashing, and that's the moment when gas is highest and other apps are trying to consume the space. And so I think like actually perpetual DEXs living by itself is one of the most like valid use cases for sort of separating things. And then other applications like make no sense, I think, to be by themselves. Like DEXs and money markets are only interesting when they're like near each other because you're like liquidating the collateral on a money market in a DEX, and a DEX you're trading other assets that are existing on the same chain. And so for us, like it's not really about it's wanting to like acknowledge the fact that you have different use cases which might require different infrastructure sort of setups for what they're trying to achieve. And then the other piece is like, to the extent that we're doing this within our own block space on like Ethena's network itself, it's not going to be like a generalized chain to say, hey, come do gaming here, come do consumer apps, come do whatever. It's just saying, if you're part of this ecosystem of apps that are growing USDe and it makes sense to be within this block space, come and do it here. And this is like our ground for experimentation and growing USDe. And then you can do interesting stuff where stuff like USDe is the gas token on the network, so you're always paying in dollars. You can do like gasless transfers of USDe where you're not paying to get dollars in and out of the chain when you're bridging and transferring it on the chain. And then also natively, whenever you're holding money on the chain, it's automatically collecting like a yield within that dollar. So yeah, there's some interesting things that you can sort of like customize when you're wanting to use like a dollar at the centerpiece rather than something like ETH, for example.
Then I think the use of Ethereum or other Ethena network product in terms of user experience, then the core difference with the CEX will be the native yield. Is it correct? Yeah.
That and then self-custody, so you're holding your own assets on chain and you don't have to trust with a centralized exchange. You know? And then everything else kind of looks a bit like a centralized exchange where the matching and the essentially like the engine at the background is all off-chain.
Does it, I don't know, make some conflict of interest with the CEX because USDe make their, I just wonder. I just wondered about this. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've obviously flagged it with like the partners and stuff that we're working with already, and I think generally they're pretty supportive of. And I think you've seen all of these exchanges do the same thing, which is like they want to see the on-chain economy grow as well. Like they're all launching their own chains, they're backing exchanges the whole time, and just generally, I think they're supportive of seeing stuff happening more off-chain than necessarily trying to keep it all within centralized exchanges. And so I think Ethena's done a pretty good job of actually being neutral infrastructure across the space where we're providing a product that's actually useful for, you know, even like other stablecoins. You would have thought that we'd be enemies with MakerDAO when we came out, and now we're sort of like the biggest partners of Maker, where, you know, they have like $1 billion of exposure to Ethena within Maker. And so I think we've done a reasonable job of like towing the line between different parties, whether it's exchanges or the stablecoins and stuff like that, and trying to be neutral across all of them rather than doing stuff that's like outright competitive. But yeah, I do take your point that at some scale, there's obviously like some competitive tension there.
Yeah, I think Ethena is building very complex ecosystem of that connecting the CeFi and DeFi and also TradFi. Then outside of the currency that you are building right now, what do you think it is the most biggest opportunity in this market, CeFi or DeFi or other RWA's market?
Yeah, so I think both Ethena and MakerDAO have probably exhausted like the opportunity set for dollars on chain already, like at our size, unless DeFi grows a massive amount. So I don't think DeFi native dollars are gonna, there's like another 5 billion or 10 billion left in just DeFi. You need to look elsewhere to get that growth unless DeFi really does increase from where it is now. I think the two steps that we think about is collateral within CeFi, which is all the stuff that we're talking about with USTB and USDe. And I think that that's a multi-billion dollar opportunity. So just to give you a sense of scale, there's $30 billion of Tether where the sole use case of that is just margining derivatives on exchanges. So that opportunity set there to just say you can collect a yield instead of not having a yield for $30 billion of derivatives. That's like an opportunity set that's even larger than Ethena sort of covered even at its peak. And then I think the last bit that comes after that is something that we spoke about there with like the negative correlation of this product to rates that you see in the real world, where I think once you've got some sufficient scale and stuff within CeFi, this is a very natural product that can actually be packaged up and actually put on a platter to bring into TradFi. So we had a couple of some of those larger entities like Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, they invested into Ethena in the seed. And the whole thesis behind what they were doing there is this is just an easy access point for TradFi to get dollars into yield within crypto in one click. And so that's definitely like, if we're thinking about gross dollar opportunity size, that's definitely the largest, but it obviously just takes a lot more time to get them comfortable with things through the cycle.
What do you think will be the catalyst for this CeFi or TradFi coming into the crypto? I know they are coming. They have very much interest in right now, but I don't know what specific event or the condition would make them more interested in this market.
I think interest rates going to zero will start to get a lot more money into crypto risk. Same story as last time.
Yeah.
There's just a long history of people doing increasingly more stupid things when interest rates are at zero. And I think that, a lot of the activity is always going to be driven by like liquidity, whether it's in China and the US or just like rates coming down. And I think now the great thing about the ETFs is that it's like a segue where they've like dipped their toes in now and it's like a legitimate asset class that they can do more. And I think this cycle is going to get pretty crazy when we start to see them expanding to do more, because you speak to some of the guys who are like on the desk there in those firms. There's like 100 people sitting within those firms on the like crypto teams, and you look around and you're like, what exactly are these people doing every day when there's two products, there's BTC and ETH ETFs? You don't need 100 people to do that. So they need to justify their own existence to do more in the next 2 years. And the question is, what is more? And we think like $1 with a yield is a pretty natural product that you sort of look at after like the initial segue through BTC and ETH.
What scenario do you expect when I'm not sure about this, but if rate goes zero in this cycle, then what would happen in Ethena, do you think?
I mean, we can look at the data from last cycle. Basically funding rates were at, call it 20 to 40% when rates were at zero last cycle. And so actually Ethena came out of potentially one of the worst macro backdrops you could ever imagine, which is like your hurdle rate of treasuries was the highest it's ever been in the last 20 years. And so for us, yeah, if we just look at the data that we saw from last cycle, there was roughly a 30 to 40% spread of funding rates within crypto versus what you saw with treasuries. And so naturally what I think happens is as Ethena grows, like the interest rate around USDe will shrink because as more capital comes in, naturally the interest rate will come down. And I think the bit that people maybe don't recognize is that Ethena might actually look quite boring in a few years, which is like it'll be quite a lot bigger than it is now, but the interest rate will be much lower because there'll be TradFi money sitting in there and thinking, you know, if treasuries are like 2 or 3%, I'm happy to get 8 rather than like 15. And yeah, I think it might have a slightly different user base who actually engages with it in the future, where it might not be just the degen crowd who are wanting to get 20 or 30%, and that opportunity will probably be collapsed, which isn't a negative thing, by the way. It's kind of like the observation, which is whenever you see a financial market where there's excess return and too much yield or whatever it is, it's always going to come down through time. It's just we want Ethena to be the vehicle that sort of like forces that outcome. And you're obviously going to create some value while that happens.
What do you think, what is target user of Ethena right now? Is it degen or is it other TradFi foundations of institutions?
Yeah, it really is a mix. Funnily enough, actually, we looked at some of the IP data and I don't even believe the data, but apparently 45% of the IP touching Ethena was from Korea.
No way.
Oh, really? Yeah.
This is when we first came out. So if you just think about that from like a population perspective, that is like the most insane number. But yeah, I think it really is, like I said earlier, like $1 with a return really appeals to pretty much everyone on earth, whether you're a trading fund who's highly sophisticated or you're just a user who wants to hold that in your wallet. I think if we just look at the distribution now, it's pretty large with like larger entities. So we have had some TradFi firms who are coming in with like large 8-figure type exposures into Ethena. And I think naturally through time, it really depends like where we're expanding. So, you know, we launched on ETH and like ETH is a bit of a chain for like whales with large amounts of money and you haven't got like a huge amount of small retail balances touching that. We have been expanding to new chains like Solana, for example, where we did see that the wallet size shrunk as we went on there. And I think there's interesting opportunities as well to think about what does it actually look like in totally different like user environments, like a Ton, for example. So I think Ton is quite an interesting like user set where the people who are engaged with Ton and like the games and stuff on there are actually users who aren't even touching centralized exchanges in most of the cases. And that's why you've seen, you know, Binance, Bybit are listing all of these Ton meme coins the whole time because it actually brings so many new users that they've never touched before. That's one area that I'm quite excited about, which is actually bringing this product into like the Ton wallets where you can actually hold $1 within your messaging app, send it to your friend, spend with it in your Telegram app, and like get a yield as you're holding USDe in there. And that's obviously just like hundreds of millions of people that are using it there. So we're hoping that the sort of user profile changes through time, where now it's kind of like crypto native whales, rich existing users. We want to have two different angles. One is like really push into the TradFi size where it's even bigger ticket sizes with just institutions, but then also to like the much smaller wallet balance users in places like Ton or something else that looks like it.
I think, yes, shifting some topics here. I think there are, I think you mentioned it right now, but I think there are pretty much two distinct markets in crypto right now. There are monetary revolution market, Bitcoin or DeFi or RWAs, and also other speculative users applications such as meme coins and social platforms. What do you think what do you think is the best use case for crypto? I think what inspires you most inside the crypto right now, and also what do you think where the industry are heading?
Yeah, I'm maybe like the wrong person to ask about this because I'm slightly cynical about a lot of these things, but I think it's kind of in the name. It's like cryptocurrency. So like currency is money, and that's kind of what we know people use this mostly for. It's like finance, money, things that are related to that. I think the further that you step away from that core use case of money and finance, like it becomes a bit more tenuous how big the market opportunity set like is. And so I think I look back at some of the ideas and stuff from last cycle where we're trying to make it happen, you know, like the metaverse and these things, which are just like a bit further from that core use case. I'm a little bit more skeptical as to how big the market size is for that. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try it, because that's where the opportunity lies if people are dismissing it and think so it's not going to be real. But I think for me, just circling back to that original idea that I had in the beginning, I think stablecoins, speculation with trading, and then money, those are kind of like the really core things. And my view is that we should think about doing those things much better and making sure that those are like killer use cases of crypto, where it completely takes over payments in the world, it completely takes over finance. That's what we need to make sure that we do really well. And we run the risk of sort of not achieving anything if we spread ourselves too thin and try and do all of these like different subcategories where we're just not sure if there really is like fit outside of speculation.
Yeah. Then following up your answers, the recently Vitalik tweeted about the criticize about DeFi, that it is pretty much Ouroboros, I guess. I don't know if this pronunciation is right, but yeah, I think that he criticized that the current DeFi system are pretty much shape inner loop system that are making fees from other protocol and also use the protocol for yield or something like that. How do you think about this criticism of Vitalik?
Yeah, I think it's quite fair in a number of different ways. So I think a lot of DeFi is like self-referential, just tokens sort of being swapped around into different boxes, and there's not like any real activity that's generating like the yield or the returns and stuff like that. I think there are some like basic use cases which I like personally find useful, but I can understand why a lot of the people in the real world don't find it useful. Like I think Aave is one good example where I use that the whole time, but like it's not useful to my dad because he doesn't have a lot of ETH sitting around to get a loan against it. But you kind of see like an end state of where that is useful. I think the problem that I have with like Vitalik's view and generally how he sort of thinks about ETH and the stuff that's being built on it is that we need to remember that actually all of the value from ETH comes from its use within DeFi and its use as like money and collateral within these systems. And if DeFi didn't exist, I think ETH would be worth less than $100. Like everything else that's on there, it's if we think about what's actually going on underneath, it's just sending stable coins, holding like large value assets like BUIDL funds or T-bills or whatever it is, and then like a bit of a casino where people are trading different assets. If we ignore all of that stuff, then there isn't actually valuable, like anything that's going on underneath that's actually valuable and would make it $100 billion asset plus. And so, yeah, I think that there is valid criticism, but we should also like recognize that the value from most of these assets is sort of coming from that. And if we totally ignore it, then I think we've got some like more difficult questions around like what are these like base layer assets actually worth?
Yeah, can you repeat the last sentence?
Yeah, it was more just about like being careful about totally dismissing these use cases, because I think there's a valid question around if these base layers and layer ones are worth anything at all if you don't have the use case of like DeFi to use the layer one asset as money within those systems. And so, I think some of the criticism was fine. We just need to be a little bit careful about completely dismissing it.
Can you throw your last question?
Oh, so yeah, so kind of summing up these all discussions, I have one last question about what would be the end game of Ethena and USDe?
Yeah, I think the way we try to characterize it is we've got the core vision, which is trying to build like crypto native money, and then we have the network and the exchange, which are the two pieces that we sort of spoke about earlier. So the quick way that we summarize things was sort of money, network, and exchange, and Ethena sits at sort of like a pretty interesting middle ground between each of those things, where the core product, as I said, is creating that money. In terms of exchanges, it's bringing the liquidity and the flows, and then the network is building the ecosystem around the core product.
I have one more question then. This is a little bit more personal question, and I wonder, how do you feel the difference between living as an investor and also as a builder or founder right now?
Yeah, I love this a lot more. I can never go back. I think even if Ethena isn't successful, doesn't work or whatever, I'll try and do something else like building again. I think you don't get that much joy out of just kind of making money for other people or just like making money for money's sake, I find. I think trying to feel like you're actually building something that other people look at and appreciate or think is a good product or whatever, that's kind of the bit that I like the most. And so, yeah, I think the moments that I've got like the most joy out of Ethena is like just small comments you'd see on like Twitter sometimes, just going like, oh, this is a cool product, or this was like a useful thing that didn't exist before. And so, yeah, I think that that's kind of the thing that I get the most out of it, and I would never go back to just kind of trying to make money for money's sake. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you start building something you really care about, you can't really go back.
So have you guys
see-
used USD or no?
Is that?
Sorry?
Did you use USD or no? Were you on the IP tracking that we picked up? Or?
Were we part of the 45% of Koreans? Are you guys using USDe?
Yeah, I have most of my money USD in
God.
Infinix right now.
All right. Well, I
think-
appreciate
yeah.
that, obviously, but make sure you diversify, and that's myself included as well. I wouldn't, not 100%. I obviously love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Well, thank you, Guy, for your time. It was very valuable, and we learned a lot about Ethena and you.
Yeah, it was good. Different format from normal, so it was good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cheers.